Explained. And if you know, you know. Okay, let me just say that right now. If you know, you know. Let's
So
get
first
into it.
things first, this is not an explanation video on the publication history of Doctor Doom in Marvel Comics. This, much like the video that we did on the Black Priests and the Builders, is a video explaining Doctor Doom's involvement in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run, basically the collapse of the multiverse, going into Secret Wars 2015. So, as we mentioned before, if what you're looking for is a chronological series of events, how it starts and how it ends, I'll link that video down in the description. If you're looking for a full totality video, here's every story arc, every event that happens, running from the beginning of the multiverse's collapse all the way up to its destruction and Secret Wars, you will find that on the Comics Explained Full Stories channel, and I will link that in the description as well. So one of the first things to know is that in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run, running all the way up until you get to Time Runs Out, Doctor Doom is a background character. You don't see him very often. It's not until Time Runs Out that he suddenly becomes a major player. And that's where Jonathan Hickman builds in the closed loop system for Doctor Doom. And here's what that means. The beginning of Doctor Doom's involvement with the collapse of the multiverse starts in New Avengers issue number 6. Specifically, once the Illuminati have already learned about the nature of the Incursions and encountered their first incursion. Now, most people know that Doctor Doom is the cause of the Incursions, but the confusion sets in when you start looking at comics like this, because when an incursion takes place, Doctor Doom doesn't seem to know what's going on. And in fact, he says that, right? He says, "You dare, of all the faces in all the worlds, you choose to accost Doom in his own home." And then he just blasts all the Siddharamaris away. Now, if you're interested in learning about the Siddharamaris, the map makers, and the builders, I'll link that video down so you can check it out. And I might just include the whole playlist for these videos that we're making. There's only really going to be 3, but
He's
still,
so
it's all in
cold.
one place and easy to watch. That once the Illuminati essentially detonate an antimatter bomb and blow up the incursive Earth, Doctor Doom is just kind of there watching them all leave. But there is a piece of that Earth that is secured by Doctor Doom. And so for the remainder of Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers going into Time Runs Out, it's basically just him studying that. But you don't really see the full totality of it until you get to Time Runs Out in New Avengers issue number 27. And again, this is where a lot of that confusion starts to set in, because as Jonathan Hickman establishing, Doctor Doom does not know what's going on with the incursions, the collapse of the multiverse, or any of that stuff. And so there comes a point when he meets with the Molecule Man, Owen Reese. Now, to sidetrack this for a second and to talk about the relationship between the two, it's pretty important to understand the relationship here and to even understand how Jonathan Hickman takes the nature of the Molecule Man and ties it in to the greater collapse of the multiverse. So when the Molecule Man first popped up in Marvel Comics, he was just a guy who could kind of alter reality, sort of, but only if he had his wand in his possession, and he could only really do it on a small localized space. And that was basically it. In Secret Wars 1984, all that changed, because as most of you guys probably know by now, in the original Secret Wars event, Doctor Doom stole the power of Galactus and then used that to steal the power of the original Beyonder. We'll explain how the original Beyonder and the Beyonders themselves tie together, here in a little bit. But Doctor Doom, having all this power, had actually kind of built a friendship, if you want to call it that, with Owen Reese. And what Doctor Doom realized is that Owen's power was limited basically because he lacked confidence. He kind of had these subconscious mental blocks in place because he didn't really believe in himself. Eventually, Doctor Doom makes Owen aware of this, and then those mental blocks are removed, and Owen Reese is elevated to what you and I would call pre-retcon Molecule Man, and we'll also explain what that means here in a second. Pre-retcon Molecule Man was unfathomably powerful. I mean, this guy was powerful on a multiversal level. It was insane what Owen Reese was capable of. And really the name Molecule Man is kind of a misnomer. He's really altering and manipulating matter on the atomic level. It's just Molecule Man just sounds cooler than Atomic Man. So I guess that's the reason why Marvel went with it. And so it continues on this way for quite some time in Marvel. You really get a full display of Owen's power in Secret Wars 2, when the original Beyonder comes to Earth after having encountered Doom and then kind of fleeing out of fear of what Doom was capable of. When the Beyonder shows up to Earth in Secret Wars 2, it's to kind of understand the nature of humanity, right? What's the value of life? What does it mean to live? Why do humans do the kind of things they do? Why do they wage war? Why do they fall in love? All that kind of stuff. And so there comes a point when the Beyonder just presents himself as a clear and present danger to the universe as a whole, insofar as he's just kicking around the idea of destroying it. And so he and Owen end up in a fight, and the conflict between the two was so extreme, their battle was sending shockwaves through the multiverse. So it was like an earthquake that started in the main Marvel universe, and people 5 universes over could feel it. It was that intense. And so, of course, where this inevitably leads to the defeat of the Beyonder, where he
boys
goes
boxing.
on and becomes his own universe, essentially, that goes into Fantastic Four 319, I believe it is, which is the unofficial Secret Wars 3. In fact, it's titled Secret Wars 3. It was supposed to be a big event, but due to
Yo, I
any number
love
of
Doom,
background
bro.
things going
Doom is, I wouldn't say he's my favorite character. I don't have too many favorites just because I haven't been keeping up as of recently. But he is up there. He's definitely up there. He's top 10 for sure. Don't play with his name.
on in Marvel, it was just condensed to a one-shot comic. And so for those of you guys who have heard the phrase pre-retcon Beyonder or pre-retcon Molecule Man, and then post-retcon Beyonder and post-retcon Molecule Man, this Fantastic Four story is where it happens. And it's kind of how you tie the Beyonders into the greater scheme, because there's several major things that are established here. The first is that the Beyonders had had multiple dealings with Earth, right? They couldn't directly enter into the main Marvel universe. Jonathan Hickman will change that in his Avengers: A New Avengers run, but the Beyonders were instrumental in doing things like forming the Savage Land on Earth, different things like that. But the real meat and potatoes of this came with the Beyonder and Owen. And what you ended up learning was that when Owen Reese had conducted his experiment that basically gave him his powers, that what had happened is he had inadvertently undertaken the process that's used to create a cosmic cube, meaning he had opened a portal to the Beyondverse. And the way that normally works is energy from the Beyondverse is siphoned off into a cube shape, and then basically it rivals the Infinity Gauntlet in power, depending on the context of the story. But because there was no cube for the energy to go into, because it wasn't Owen's intention to open a portal to the Beyondverse, half the energy went into him, and then half the energy went out into the universe and coalesced into the original Beyonder as we knew him. And so the Beyonder was just kind of learning. It was basically a newborn child with godlike power. And so the story of the Beyonder and Owen just kind of go forward from there. But the reality here is that because they're two halves of a cosmic cube, by the time you get to the end of that story, they basically merge. And so while Owen Reese does eventually come back, he's far less powerful than he used to be before Fantastic Four 319. Hence the reason why we as fans address that version of Owen as post-retcon Molecule Man. And so with all that out of the way and kind of transitioning back to this discussion about Dr. Doom, in New Avengers issue number 27, the establishment that Doom does not know about the nature of the Incursions or even really the collapse of the multiverse on a greater level comes through a conversation with Owen Reese, where he says, "The rabble loves stories. They love the lie, which is why there is no discernible difference between what they call truth and what they call fiction. History, a collection of half-truths weaved together so as to establish a supposed firm foundation supporting all that has been built. We can agree on this, can't we, Mr. Reese?" And Owen says, "Lots of cracks underfoot, bedrock made of air. They think they understand who I am, what I am, but they're wrong. You are wrong. What's an origin but a story? What is my story but a lie? We all love our stories, don't we?" And so while there's a little more banter between the two of them, Dr. Doom basically presents the chunk of rock that he's been studying for quite some time in the background following that incursion in Latveria in New Avengers issue number 6. And in fact, he says that. He says, "It fell from the sky, a remnant of a destroyed Earth set to collide with our own. From it, we have learned things. It broadcasts a signal, acting as a buoy for worlds in the multiverse." And so that's where Dr. Doom says, "We have a pan-universal problem, Mr. Reese, but I believe it originates here, on Earth." And Owen says, "Earth, yes, it is here, but it is not here." And so Doom says, "I believe you. I want you to tell me a story, Mr. Reese, and I want it to be true. Why does the frequency of the rock signal match your own? Why is all this happening? And what is your part in it. And so, seemingly, by this point in time, Doom had become aware of the incursions, the fact that they exist, but he doesn't know what's causing them. He doesn't know how any of it starts. And that's where a lot of the confusion sets in. Because by this point in time, with the incursions already happening, and most people who have picked up this story in the modern age know that Doctor Doom is the cause of the incursions, how do you reconcile this? How can the multiverse be this far into the incursions and Doctor Doom doesn't know how it all started? Well, this is the closed loop system. Up until this moment, right here, Doctor Doom didn't know. But then he learns, because Owen Reese takes himself and Doctor Doom into the past of an alternate universe. Now, this segment takes place in New Avengers issue number 33, and one of the things to know is that up until this moment, Owen Reese had been displaying symptoms of insanity. For some reason, he was not his normal self. We didn't necessarily know why, he just wasn't as lucid as he always was. But the moment they jump back to this point in the past of an alternate reality, suddenly Owen is back to his normal self, and in fact, he addresses that. Dr. Doom says, "This is the place where you became the Molecule Man. A long and twisted tale it is, Mr. Reese, but Doom knows your story." And Owen responds, "Do you know, right? What exactly do you know? Some second-hand account that became an origin in the telling, an accepted narrative magically encapsulating all that I was and what you think I became. You do not know anything at all, Victor Von Doom, but you should know this. I am returned here whole again, all of us." And Doom just says displacement, temporal or not, should not result in this. The psychotic wilderness, the hysterical chatter. What happened to your madness, Mr. Reese? Because while Jonathan Hickman loves long, grandiose, verbose language, the reality here is Dr. Doom recognizes that if Owen Reese's insanity was a symptom of his mental state, time travel wouldn't fix that. He would just be crazy in the here and now. And so that's why Owen says, "Nothing yet." And he just says, "Watch." And he points him in the direction of this alternate realities version of Owen. And he says, "You're a man of both science and magic, Victor, the natural and unnatural. Quite the dichotomy, and the one person perfectly capable of fully comprehending what I'm going to tell you. I am not a man, not the way that most people understand being human. Here we are now. Not only have we fallen back in time to my so-called origin, but we are in another universe altogether, natural and unnatural, a machine of great science and the magic on which it runs." He says, "That man here, he is not me, and yet he is me. He doesn't understand it yet." And in fact, the version of him that says he doesn't understand it yet is this alternate reality version of Owen. So they're essentially completing each other's sentences. And so Owen just walks up to him and says, "Are you ready?" And this alternate reality version of Owen just says, "Do you remember before this moment, when we were younger, 7, I think, it was spring, and we were chasing a friend through the woods. There was a beautiful white flower growing beside a large oak tree. It caught our attention. We stopped running so we could
Peak storytelling. Whoever wrote this, props. Just peak storytelling.
lean down and smell it." And he says, "I am not that smell, or the birds chirping, or any other sound of the forest. I am the light perfectly hitting the flower, bits of dust heated by the sun, swimming in the air above it. It was a cherished memory. Everything is loss." And so at that point, when the main Marvel Universe Owen Reese kneels down, he fashions a dagger and he kills that alternate reality version of himself. And he says, "Now that memory is gone forever. And now, Victor, your origin, much like mine, is a fiction that will become accepted as real. But this is the only time we're going to do this together. From now on, it's going to be up to you. If you don't, they will never call you the Great Destroyer." And that's where Doom asks, "They, right? Who are you talking about?" And the response of Owen, "Everyone. The fallen, the victims of dying worlds. You're faithful, and more than anyone else, your enemies." And he says, "I will show you." And so what he does is he takes Dr. Doom to the Library of Worlds. Now, Jonathan Hickman doesn't give us a huge explanation on what the Library of Worlds is, so I'll essentially fill this in. At some point along the line, the Beyonders had created the Library of Worlds and then presented it to the multiverse. And so the Library of Worlds actually exists kind of outside the multiverse. So when you're in the library, no one in the multiverse can see you. The Living Tribunal cannot see you, none of the cosmic entities can see you. Only those who access the library can see you. However, it is a hallway of doors to the multiverse. So you can enter in and out of any reality across the multiverse through the library. It's the reason why in the video that we did, where we were talking about the Black Priests, yet another group trying to figure out how to stop the incursions, why they were constantly assaulting the Library of Worlds. Because instead of just being in this universe over here and then jumping to that reality, and the time that it would take to do it, instead, within the library, they get a bird's eye top-down view of the entire multiverse. So they see everything that's going on, everyone involved in the multiverse. It's like watching a battlefield from a satellite. You can literally see everything that's going on. And so that's why Owen Reese says the library exists in a version of the same unobservable space the Beyonders watch the multiverse from. As such, from here, you too will be unobservable, both to the worlds and to them. And Dr. Doom looks at this and almost kind of considers it a cowardly thing, right? That he would be hiding out. He says, if there is one thing I have learned from the conquest of cowards, it's that I cannot hide forever. And the response of Owen is, you will not be hiding. And you're right, eventually you will be found. But that will be by an old friend. Our concern, your sole concern, is the Ivory Kings themselves. You must stop the Beyonders. And Doom asks the question, from doing what exactly? And that's where Owen says, conducting their greatest of grand experiments, the simultaneous death of everything in the multiverse. You remember your first encounter with the Child Beyonder. It destroyed a universe in order to construct a playworld out of the ashes. These are its betters, with far more ambitious goals. And do you know what I am? I am their bomb. And he says all beings exist in various states across the multiverse. In one reality, perhaps you were a poet, in another, a beggar, and in another one, a good man. But he says, I am not that. I was
Do we see? Never mind. I ain't even going. I'm not gonna say that. But if you know, you know.
constructed as a singular being across all of space and time, an old experiment of shared minds, a single consciousness shared throughout all of my infinite selves. And that's why that first alternate reality version of Owen that was killed was literally recounting the exact same memories that Owen Reese from the main Marvel Universe had, because it's not separate memories. That version of Owen and any version of Owen Reese across the multiverse is not their own personality. They're a bunch of individual beings that share a singular mind, and they all share the same experiences, whether they know it or not. But Owen says, the Beyonders lit my fuse, and now I, all of me, am terminal. And when I die, I will take my universe with me. And they want to see what happens when we all go off at once. And that's where Doom says, but that is not what occurred. You died and nothing happened. Speaking about that alternate reality version of Owen. And that's where Owen says, sure it did. But that me, one of an infinite number of me's, died early. First, in fact, if we're going to thwart their plan, you're going to have to kill a whole lot more of me, and soon. Now, here's a crazy thing, and it's something that Jonathan Hickman doesn't really seem to reconcile over the course of his run. One of the big issues to contend with here is the belief that whenever a Molecule Man dies, it blows up their entire universe. And in fact, it does. When a Molecule Man is killed, that universe is destroyed. That's what Reed Richards was referring to at the very beginning of Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run. This idea that an event transpired in an alternate reality that led to the destruction of that universe. When that universe was destroyed, the universes next to it were pulled towards each other in what was basically the first incursion. Both those universes crashed into each other, which pulled the universes next to them towards each other, because the multiverse was quite literally shrinking in size. And so it's as if you have a straw in a cup of water, and as you drink the water out of that cup through that straw, the cup starts to shrink in size to match the amount of water that's in it. And while the death of any Molecule Man does destroy that multiverse, it did raise a very, very important question that we'll talk about here in a minute. Because what happens is that in this continued conversation, Dr. Doom says, I'm not sure I find any of this believable. And Owen tells him, you will when you reach a high enough threshold. You'll start seeing some real results from your work, the blue and red shift of Incursions. And Doom asks, how long do you have until you reach your final terminal state? And Owen says, 25 years. So in effect, Doctor Doom has 25 years from the first time the Molecule Man was killed to kill every other Molecule Man across the multiverse in order to stave off the multiverse's destruction. Here's the issue. If the death of a Molecule Man wipes out a whole universe, and Doctor Doom's intention is to travel the multiverse and kill every Molecule Man that exists, wouldn't he just be killing the multiverse anyway? That's the question that lingers for a lot of people, and Jonathan Hickman kind of indirectly answers that by the time you get to the end of the story. But still, right, kind of continuing this bit on, Doctor Doom addresses the fact that killing an infinite number of Molecule Men across the multiverse kind of seems impossible. There's no conceivable way to do that within 25 years, that he and Owen cannot undertake a task of that scale successfully. But Owen tells him it's more dire than Doctor Doom thinks, because as time passes and more Molecule Men are killed, Owen will start to become fractured, because in effect, he's cutting off pieces of his own mind every time a Molecule Man dies. And so that's why Doom says, if ultimately it will just come down to me, then the chances of success just went from whatever 0.000 driving on into infinity 1% to nothing, right? There's no conceivable way that it can be done. And that's where Owen says, you have to start a religion. Because Owen understands that people will do anything in the name of a religion if they believe that the instruction is coming from the being they recognize as their deity. And so that's what Doctor Doom does. Doctor Doom goes on this crusade of killing virtually every Molecule Man he can find from across the multiverse, basically creating more incursions. And so this is how you get into the closed loop system that Jonathan Hickman is building. One of the big mistakes that people make is they believe that the goal of Doctor Doom is to stop the incursions. No, that is not the goal of Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom, at this point, when he's learning all of this, begins to realize the incursions are just a byproduct of what it is that he's actually trying to do, which is stop the Beyonders. The incursions are ideally something that can just kind of be stemmed as time goes on, right? Kill enough Molecule Men, the incursions will ultimately stop, the multiverse will look like Swiss cheese with all the holes in it, but hey, at least there'll be something left, right? And so the closed loop system works like this. Doctor Doom starts at point A, which is New Avengers issue number 6, learning about the incursions for the first time. And so he continues on that path until he gets to point B, which is where Molecule Man takes him back in time, which is way back, 20-something years before point A. And in turn, he's learning about all of this. And so Doctor Doom, in effect, caused the very incursions that he is trying to stop. He's just now learning about it. And so you could make a credible argument here. And so what's truly going on here is that while Doctor Doom is traveling through the multiverse, traveling into the past of those different universes and killing Molecule Men, there's still Doctor Doom in the main Marvel Universe doing whatever he does, right? So it would be like if when Doctor Doom was 8 years old, and he saw that his mom basically died and his dad died and all that kind of stuff. While that was going on, 3 universes over, his future self was killing a version of Molecule Man. That's basically what's going on here, right, within the collapse of the multiverse. So hopefully that shines a lot more light and clears up a...
He put in that work since a youngin', bro. Since he was a little jit, he was putting in that work. No cap.
lot more of what was going on here. But again, as time passes, Doctor Doom begins to realize that he just has not killed enough Molecule Men. The incursions are still happening. And so while everything that we've just covered here with regards to Owen Reese explaining his origin and all that kind of stuff, it's all basically a flashback that Doctor Doom is telling to Doctor Strange, who's now learned that Doctor Doom is the one behind the incursions, that while Doctor Doom kind of repeats all of this, right, tells Strange all of this, he says the first incursion occurred after 7 years of murdering Molecule Men. So the time the first Molecule Man was killed, 7 years later, an incursion took place. And so that's the moment when after that first Molecule Man was killed and his universe was destroyed, that the universes next to it were being pulled towards one another. It took 7 years for those universes to finally meet one another and to crash into each other. The following year after that first incursion, so year 8, he found his first Black Swan and began building the entirety of the Black Swans in order to operate as his own religion. Here's the kicker. Doctor Doom never showed them his face, and he never told them who he truly was or why he was doing what he was doing. That instead, he just kind of fabricated a whole story. I am Raboom Alal, and the incursions first began when I was born. And in order to stop these incursions, we have to kill Molecule Men to save the multiverse. And so the Black Swans just continued on that path, operating basically as if Doctor Doom was their god, doing his bidding without question. Now, that of course leads us to ask the question, at the very beginning of Avengers and New Avengers, we met Yabat, a Black Swan who had seemingly defected. Why? Why did she walk away from Doctor Doom? Well, number one, she wasn't the only one, but there were a handful of Black Swans who learned the reality of Doctor Doom, who learned that he was basically lying. The story of Raboom Alal was never true, despite the fact that Yabat seemed to repeat the concept to everybody that she had come across. The idea of killing Molecule Men seemed incredibly gross and unjust. But for Yabat herself, because her family had hailed from a universe that had been destroyed in the incursions, the main goal she had was to try to stem the collapse of the multiverse and stop the incursions so that she could basically resurrect her family on an alternate universe. Because of what point would it be to bring her family back on an alternate reality if they're going to turn around and just get destroyed in another incursion? And so that's why she was helping to develop antimatter bombs and then jumping from one reality to the next, destroying incursive Earths. Hence the reason why she didn't show up at the very beginning of Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers intending to kill the main Marvel Universe Molecule Man, and instead just blew up that alternate Earth. Having said that, the other part of this is that as more Molecule Men were killed across the multiverse, the Beyonders began to take notice, and that's what led into the creation of the map makers and the Sidera Maris. The idea that they were quite literally an organism created by the Beyonders. And in fact, we're told that 10 years in, the Beyonders realized something was very wrong and attempted to deduce why their great experiment was failing, in the same way that they introduced a self-destruct mechanism into the fabric of the multiverse, of course referring to Owen Reese. They spliced a problem-solving virus into real space, and as a result, any self-aware artificial intelligence capable of trans-universal travel would be automatically infected, its entire makeup conscripted into the Beyonders' celestial inquiry. The map makers and the Sidera Maris charted worlds where Molecule Men had died, marking the moments of my swans seeding sacrifice worlds and preserving future incursion worlds. And so after learning all of this, the biggest question that we were left with here was, if Doctor Doom killing Molecule Men across the multiverse would lead to the destruction of those universes, and say for example that Doctor Doom and the Black Swans would be successful, and they destroyed every Molecule Man across the multiverse, then wouldn't they just inevitably destroy the multiverse anyway? The answer to that question is yes. The question to ask in response to that is, did Doctor Doom ever realize that? And the answer seems to be yes. Jonathan Hickman never confirms that he actually figures it out. There's no real moment in the story where Doom sits down and tells Doctor Strange, after a while I realized that if I killed every Molecule Man across the multiverse, I'd basically destroy the multiverse anyway. Doctor Doom just seems to draw this conclusion that if the Beyonders are truly the bad guys here, the ones conducting this grand experiment, and the Molecule Men are the bombs that they created, then why not just use the Molecule Men to blow up all the Beyonders? And so that's exactly what Doctor Doom did. It's the reason why the Black Swans who defected chose to defect, because they realized that once it was all fake, that Doctor Doom was no longer killing Molecule Men, that what Doctor Doom was doing was rounding Molecule Men up. And so that's when you get to the ending of Avengers and New Avengers, specifically the ending of New Avengers issue number 33.
This was fire. This was fire to watch when it came out.
When Doctor Doom unleashes all these Molecule Men onto the Beyonders, and quite literally blows all the Beyonders up. But that's the miscalculation, because Doctor Doom believed that with the destruction of the Beyonders, potentially there might be some universes next to them that may be destroyed. What he didn't bank on was the sheer amount of power that would be let loose by an explosion of that magnitude and the deaths of those Beyonders all in one fell swoop. And so that's why he shouts out no, right, when he realizes just how big of an error he had made. And it's the reason why, once you get to the end of the story, Reed Richards and Black Panther are looking through the bridge, right, studying the multiverse. And Reed says, diagnostics say the bridge is fully functional. It's not a ghost or flawed reading. The data is solid. what we're seeing is correct. Just like that, without any explanation, the number of universes went from hundreds of thousands down to less than 24. And so they just say, we're out of time, it's over, all is lost. Because while the Beyonders were seemingly destroyed by Doctor Doom, the Incursions were still happening. And that's where Doctor Doom is able to grab pieces of different universes before they're completely eradicated in the Incursions and save them. Because by the time you get to the very beginning of Secret Wars, when the multiversal buoys are made by Reed Richards of the main Marvel Universe, and the Maker in the Ultimate Universe, in the background, Doctor Doom is grabbing universes, right? And so once the final incursion happens between the main Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe, and the multiverse is blinked out of existence, Doctor Doom takes the pieces of the multiverse that he was able to save and then hodgepodges them together and forms Battleworld. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully it provides a lot more clarity for Doctor Doom, the Beyonders, and the Molecule Man as far as Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers goes, because I know there's been a lot of confusion and the goal was to clear it up. So with that being said, we're going to bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you guys for watching.
Hey, that definitely cleared some up. Ooh. Because I read through that whole series, but never knowing that Doom was in the background. Hey, that's cool. That's cool to think about. Like, while he was in his childhood, he was already conquering. You know, he's already doing what he do. That's crazy to think about. Damn, man. Love it. Love to see it. Need to see more of it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, sub if you want. I'll be putting out more.